Hello everybody, I'm back with another Marvel Legends Spider-Man animated series themed video, and today I'm going to be looking at the latest 2-pack featuring Doctor Strange and Morbius. Once again, this is a slightly strange pairing, as has been the case with the other figures in these sets so far. They seem to be taking random characters who never really met in most cases on screen, and then put them together into a box set, which is kind of unusual, but I suppose it makes it a bit varied and a little bit interesting, not knowing quite who you're going to get next. And needless to say, one of these characters is one that I've been long looking forward to in this line, and that is Morbius, because he has such a very distinct look in the animated series that isn't replicated anywhere else in comic books or on film. So let's take a look at this packaging. It is the standard small box shape. It is plastic free, so it is all cardboard, but we have this fantastic front cover image, which I love this. Obviously it's very nostalgic, it's harking back to the old Toy Biz animated series style. However, there are brand new images commissioned for this artwork that is very much in keeping with the style and tone of the animated series, which is really nice. So we have this really fun image here of Doctor Strange and Morbius together. If we look at the side panel, we can see that there is that wonderful Spider-Man animated series logo, and we have the classic billboards taken from the Toy Biz packaging from many years ago, which looks great. But if we flip that and look at the other side panel, we can see that again they're sticking with this VHS theme, where it looks like there's two videos in a pack basically, and we have Doctor Strange and Morbius facing each other at the bottom of the packaging. They're facing off, and of course you can stack these in line with your other figures in this collection, and you've got a pretty robust cast of characters by now. And then finally, if we look at the back of the packaging, again we have those billboards, but this time rather than illustrated images we actually have photos of the action figures themselves. Again, their backgrounds are taken directly from the 90s Toy Biz packaging, which I love and I still think looks really effective today. And then the rest of the packaging is given over to that small print there, but this still looks pretty fun and quite presentable, and all in all I really like this packaging. Let's kick off by taking a look at Doctor Strange. Now, we've had quite a number of Doctor Stranges across the years, so what is different about this one? Well, the first thing to pick up on is actually the head sculpt, because this looks to be a brand new head sculpt, which is quite surprising since a lot of this figure has been recycled with just a slightly different paint job. This actually does represent a brand new sculpt. And there's actually quite a lot of detail going on in this sculpt, which is kind of interesting. He looks a little bit older than the typical sculpt that we get, and the hair is slightly different as well. So I think they've done a really nice job with this. There's some really nice paint apps, and it's got quite a good representation of the character. What I would say is that it actually isn't a great representation of Doctor Strange from the animated series. So I'm a little bit surprised by this. I'm not entirely sure what the intention is. I think if you're going to create a brand new head sculpt for this release, you'd model it much more closely to the source material, which makes me think that perhaps they've got another Doctor Strange figure they're planning to put out soon, another comic book version, and they've done the sculpting now, but they will be using this on other releases in the future. So if we move along and look at the body, most of the body pieces look to have been recycled from previous releases. No real surprise there, but what is new is this cape. Again, a brand new sculpt, and yeah, it's pretty similar to what we see on screen, except the colouring looks slightly off, because in the animated series this is a much lighter red. It's almost orange, whereas this is obviously a deeper, more comic book accurate red. And I don't have any issues with this. I tend to think of his costume as red anyway, his cloak being as red I should say, and you know, I think the orange would be slightly off-putting. So I actually think this works perfectly fine, and it is nice that we've got a brand new sculpt here. Now it does present some challenges when it comes to articulation, as we will see in a moment, because it is kind of stiff. It's got a little bit of give in it, but it is a bit of a hindrance. The purple shirt is accurate though, and I really do like this colouring. It definitely differentiates this version of Doctor Strange from any other version, and this is what really ties into the animated series, which is great. But sadly, there's not an awful lot going on when it comes to any kind of shading. Now, there's no cell shading, so again we have that inconsistency with this line, which is really weird. Some releases have cell shading and others don't. I wish they'd just settle on one, because it is weird having a bit of a mixed collection. But hey, there's no shading at all here, so this is bright colours all around. I think that works fine for the animated series. I don't need a lot of shading on these figures, but it's always appreciated if there's a little bit of a wash. Moving on to the articulation, there's a ball joint at the top of the neck. The head can move from side to side, but it can't go all the way around because of that collar, but it can lean left and right. Now it can just about bend forwards, but it can't really bend back an awful lot, and again, that plastic collar there is a real hindrance. The worst offender though has to be in the shoulders, because there is a ball joint here, but you can't really move that arm very far out because that plastic cape is really blocking that, and because of the way it's shaped, there's no give whatsoever. There is a pin swivel at the elbow, so it will rotate all the way around, and it will hinge to about 90 degrees, which is fine. And then we have a pin swivel again at the wrist, allowing that hand to rotate all the way around and hinge forwards and backwards. Now there's a straight swivel at the waist, so of course he can swivel from side to side, and there is an ab crunch in the centre of the torso there, allowing him to bend forwards, but again, he's not going to go back very far. There's ball joints in the hips, the legs will kick out to the side, there's a thigh swivel at the top there, the leg will kick forwards, they'll kick backwards, and there's a double joint at the knee, allowing that lower leg to kick back. Again, the cape's slightly in the way. There is a swivel at the top of the boot cut there as well, and we actually have the standard ankle rocker that we're used to seeing by now, which will allow the foot to hinge forwards and backwards, and pivot from side to side. In terms of accessories, I don't mind telling you up front, I'm a little bit disappointed. He comes with an additional pair of closed fists, which is fine, and the standard orb effect things that we've seen many times. The first time we got these I was really excited, but this has got to be about the 100th time we've had them with a mystical character, and they're a little bit underwhelming by this point. It is nice to have them in blue, but we've had them in pretty much every colour going by this point. What would have been really cool is if we'd had the Wand of Watum or something like that, something that we see in the episode. That would have been really fun. Sadly, it's all missing here. Overall, I can't deny I'm a little bit disappointed. I love Doctor Strange and I like his appearance in the animated series, and whilst I'm not a purist in terms of the colorization, I do feel like this maybe not the best representation of the character from the animated series. Yeah, he's got the purple vest, and it's nice he's got a brand new head sculpt and a new cloak. I think that is really cool, but the head sculpt isn't really that close to what we see on screen, and it would have been nice if we'd had some extra accessories. So next up, in stark contrast to the colour and vibrancy of Doctor Strange, we have the rather muted Morbius. Now, as I said, this was the one I was most excited for because this is a character I've been waiting for a long time because of his very distinctive look in the animated series. Once again, we do have a brand new head sculpt for Morbius, which is really nice to see, and this is obviously very reminiscent of what we see on screen in the animated series. That being said, I'm not sure it's 100% likeness. Obviously the hair is stylized to make it look like it's blowing in the wind, which is very cool, but the face looks a little bit too narrow for me, and it just doesn't look quite right. The eyes are perhaps a little bit too wide and big, I'm not sure, but there's something about this that just feels a little bit off kilter. It's not quite accurate to what we see on screen. That said, clearly it is meant to represent that, and I think they've done a pretty decent job overall. There's actually some paint washes running through the hair, which is great, and you know, I really like the expression on the face. They've gone with the open mouth there, the growl and snarling mouth, which I think is, you know, a really good choice, and you know, I think this does the job for the most part. Now, it's hard to say with 100% accuracy just how many of these parts have been recycled from other figures in the line, but this torso looks new to me. Now, I haven't collected every single Marvel Legends figure, who could keep up with them all, but this does look different. And now feel free to correct me in the comments, of course, if you recognise it from another figure, but this does look new to me from what I can tell. Likewise, the coat, I'm sure we've had this before. Certainly the arms have been recycled. I feel like we may have seen this trench coat, this version of the trench coat. It's certainly an update to the one that we used to get about 10 years ago, but I'm not sure we've seen this since. I feel like we may have done, I just don't own any of those figures. What I can say with some certainty is that there's not a lot going on in the way of paint apps on this coat. It is just the base plastic in which it's moulded in. There's no washes, and there's not much detailing to write home about either. That being said, if you can peel back the coat at the base of the figure, you'll notice that it actually has an interior purple lining, which is authentic to what we see on screen, and a real nice touch here. It's just a shame that the figure doesn't really display this, and because of the nature of the plastic, it doesn't really lend itself to opening up very easily. And so you kind of miss this detail, which is unfortunate. Again, there's no cell shading on this figure, so at least he's consistent with the Doctor Strange in that respect, but I did want to point out that there is a little bit of paint apps on his belt, which again feels like a new piece to me. I don't recall seeing this on any other figures recently, but I might be wrong on that, but we can see that at least this buckle has been painted in gold, which is a really nice touch. The other thing that struck me about this body is that I feel like we're going to get a Punisher figure from the animated series pretty soon, because they could pretty much just lift this and just change the skin tone on the figure, because the Punisher has the very similar blue shirt, he has a brown trench coat, so easily enough to swap out the black for the brown there, and the legs and the details there, it all looks to be pretty consistent with what we get for the Punisher. So maybe this means we will get that in the not too distant future. One thing that I did think was very cool is that he has his suckers on the palm of his hand. So we have those kind of monstrous hands, which are great with the extended fingernails. We actually have a little bit of a wash on his wrists, which is pretty cool, adding a little bit of depth and texture there. But then we have those purple suckers. Now they're slightly uneven and the paint apps aren't perfectly applied, but I'm willing to overlook that because obviously, you know, we're talking quite a relatively small scale here in the 6-inch, and this is quite fine detail, and I think it's really good that they went to the length of actually including this, because it's so important for this character, and I'm really pleased to see it. Looking at the articulation, he has a ball joint at the top of the neck there, so the head will spin all the way around, it'll lean left and right, and because it's on that hinge, it will lean forwards and backwards a pretty healthy distance as well, which is really nice to see. He's got ball joints in the shoulders, so the arms will lift up and out. There's the complementary bicep swivel, the double joint at the elbow, although the arm can only really bend to about 90 degrees. And then we have the standard pin swivel at the wrist, allowing the hand to rotate all the way around and hinge forwards and backwards. There is a straight swivel at the waist again, so the figure can move from side to side, and he does have an ab crunch to allow him to bend forwards. He can't really bend backwards though. He's got ball joints in the hips, the legs will kick out to the side, and there's the standard thigh swivel at the top there as well. The leg will kick forwards, it will go back to rest more or less, and then we have another boot cut swivel there and a double joint at the knee, allowing that lower leg to kick all the way back. Again, you're going to have some resistance there because of the coat. You're going to be very limited in what you can do in terms of posing that, but the functionality is there. Then finally we have the standard ankle rocker, so the foot will pivot from side to side and hinge forwards and backwards. And in terms of accessories, we get an additional pair of closed fists, and that's it. I've got to be honest, this is really disappointing. Now, it's not like I expect a lot of accessories for this character, but I think it would have been really cool if we'd had an alternate, say, Michael Morbius head, some alternate Michael Morbius standard hands, you know, being able to have the ability to swap out the parts that show he's a vampire with his human form, so you kind of get two versions of the character. I don't think that would have been too costly. I appreciate there's some paint apps around the neck you'd have to play around with, but yeah, I think this would have been manageable, and it's slightly underwhelming that all we get is a pair of closed fists. So once again, I'm going to give this figure 3 stars, and I think underwhelming is the word I'd use. Now, admittedly, I had some high expectations for this particular character, and I don't think they've done a bad job. I really do appreciate the new tooling and the new head sculpts. I think they work really, really well, and I think this, you know, is definitely replicating what I'd expect for this character, but there's just something slightly off with it. I'm not sure whether it's because the hair is so windswept back, but there's something that doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't feel quite authentic to what we see on screen somehow. Now, I'm nitpicking, I suppose, but it would have been nice to have had some extra accessories. As I said, an alternate look for the character would have been really cool, but as it is, the figure feels a little bit underwhelming, like it needs something else to push it over the top, and I wasn't expecting that. Okay, so there you go, there's my thoughts on both of these figures, this particular action figure set, hot on the heels of the Daredevil and Hydra Man set from just a couple of months ago. Both of these sets feature characters that I've really long anticipated for this line, and both of them have left me feeling a little bit cold, and I think that this is a really good example of highlighting that ambivalence I have towards the most recent releases in this line, and that's because there's so many things they get right that are really good. Like, I do like the new head sculpts, I like the colours that are bright and colourful, particularly Doctor Strange in this case, but it always feels like they just miss the mark slightly, like they cut a corner or two, and it just feels like, it's so close to being there, but not quite right. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out, and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.